we start off here. First off, thank you for joining us. If you need to look at your phone at any point during this interview because of everything that's happening, go right ahead. We appreciate the time. I hope I made you proud in the second half of the season, putting on my beat writer hat, covering the Aces for the second half. So I hope I did you right. And we're going to start right here. How hectic of a week and how hectic is it right now for you with everything happening?
It's been super, super busy, but for good stuff, right? Because the Liberty, which is the beat that I cover, already pulled off a giant move. So I can't complain. Jonquel Jones was traded to the Liberty in exchange for, it was a 3-team deal, but Natasha Howard and Beck Allen and Crystal Dangerfield went out, and Kayla Thornton came in with JJ. And it's just a really, really exciting thing. Tomorrow is her introductory presser. So I'm excited to see her. A couple of years ago, I was on the Sun beat when I first started with Winsider. So it's kind of a full circle moment. I'm happy to be covering her again. And she's just an amazing player, but an even better person. She's just calm and cool about everything. So she's locked in with all of the people on the beat. And I'm really excited
And
for
also
her
a
to get the shine. Yeah, and
also
an
a former
MVP.
league
Yeah.
MVP. He's not even throwing that out there. Yeah,
Yeah.
not too bad. And that's happened, and we'll get to that specifically here in a second. But a lot of things have happened, even though again, free agency officially kicks off this Saturday. Atlanta's been making moves. Dallas has been trading away pieces. Are the Sun done? Are the Storm done? Are the Sky done? For you, outside of that trade that we'll get to next, what's kind of been your biggest takeaways of everything that's happened? Even Kurt Miller going to LA, like what's been the biggest takeaways for you?
So Kurt Miller going to LA was one of the, I think it was 6 different coaching moves that we saw. Half of the league turned over their coaching staff.
Whew.
And I think that already has been forgotten because of all of the free agency chaos and all the rumors that we're hearing now. But that moves like that have a trickle down effect. We already saw a trade between Connecticut and LA where where Kurt Miller brought in Jasmine Thomas, and she was one of the most respected veterans in Connecticut. And it says a lot, I think, about the culture that Kurt Miller is trying to bring with him. If they get Nneka Ogwumike to resign, because she's one of the biggest unrestricted free agents, and she did say that her preference would be to stay in LA, then that's just a terrific foundation for a team that prioritizes its values and its veterans, having Jazz and having Nneka there. And then you can use that and you can build up from there. So yeah, I think we shouldn't ignore all of these coaching moves and these coaching hires, because LA has been relatively dysfunctional these last few seasons, dating back to the Derek Fisher era, where they lost Candace Parker because it was hard to think of a time where Candace Parker would not be on the Sparks. They lost Chelsea Gray. Both of those players in the last 2 years have won a ring, and they're just looking for some consistency. They're looking for a rebuild there. And I think he's been to the finals a couple of times, and he's still chasing that ring. But like, I think that he's a great person to rebuild a system with.
100%. And let's get into the team that you focus on, covering the Liberty. And we talked about it a little bit, but specifically getting Jonquel Jones, a former league MVP. And we'll get into the implications of the other rumors about what's assembling or not assembling with the Liberty. But right now, with the roster that's assembled currently for the Liberty, like, how big of a deal is this for this team? Does she fit the play style? Does it have to change because she's on the roster? What are your takeaways with that?
So I think the first thing you have to look at is, coming into this offseason, there were the rumors about Brianna Stewart potentially joining the Liberty, because last year, before Sue Bird came back for another year, Stewie had taken a meeting with Joe and Clara Wu Tsai, the owners of the Liberty. And then it was like, okay, Sue's last run, she'll come back. She signed a 1-year deal, which is much more popular on the NBA side than it is on the W side, because there just
Yeah,
isn't the same kind of the player contracts. The player empowerment is not quite at the same point. So signing a 1-year deal already had people thinking, oh, in a year, she's already flirted with this other franchise. Maybe she's going to be out. But the Liberty did not want to put all their eggs in that one basket. So they went out, they were proactive, made this trade before free agency even opened, to bring in, like you've said a couple of times and I omitted before, the 2021 MVP Jonquel Jones, who is just incredible on a basketball court. She can stretch out and shoot. She can get to the basket and just finish with ease. She's able to grab a rebound off the rim and then just bring it up herself the other way. So when you're looking at the players that went out, they were big culture pieces for New York. Natasha Howard was the defensive anchor of the team, and she was very switchable. Rebecca Allen dates back to the James Dolan days, which is several arenas ago, and was the longest tenured member of the Liberty. And Beck was just a huge fan favorite. Crystal Dangerfield was a steadying impact for a team that really needed a point guard last year. They were 1-7 when she came in, and then she turned it around and they were able to get into the playoffs. So they did lose a lot of pieces, but Kayla Thornton is that player that will dive onto the ground head first. So what the Liberty have done is they've positioned themselves that even if everything else, even if they strike out the rest of the way, they're in a better position right now. The other thing that this trade did was it also opened up another 44,000 in cap space. So before this deal, they didn't have enough to offer a supermax deal. So if Stewie says, I want to go to the Liberty, but I only want the supermax, that can only be provided by the team that she's currently on. But now if Seattle says, all right, well, if you're leaving anyway, we want to get something back, the Liberty can accommodate that with picks or with young players or something like that. So this was a shrewd move because it makes the on-court product better, but it also sets them up for the next few weeks, and they still need a point guard replacement, but they are a better team than they were at the end of last season.
And while we can't track flights anymore on Twitter because of Elon Musk, people are trying to decipher and understand what these Brianna Stewart emojis mean. There was a plug, there was a money bag, there was some waves. Myles, I brought you in here for one reason. What does this mean, and where is she going? Where do you believe right now? Where do you think she's going?
So the other day I was driving home from Vermont. It was like a 6-hour drive home and my phone was just blowing up. And then I'm like, oh no, did a trade happen? Do I have to pull over on the side of the road and write something? And I stopped to get gas and I look at my phone and it's just about a dozen emojis. And I'm like, no, I can't do it. I can't get into this. But I think that right now, in my eyes, there's probably a 3-team race for Stewie. I would always handicap the odds to the team that a player was on, especially if that player has spent her entire career there, as Stewie has in Seattle. But I do think that the Liberty have made a push and that they made themselves an attractive destination last year, but they also have added since then. And the ownership group has proven time and again that they're willing to do whatever it is to grow this league. But the dark horse team that I think might be in there could be the Phoenix Mercury.
Okay.
Stewie was a teammate of Brittany Griner for several years at UMMC in Russia. And every day Stewie was putting out the messages and keeping BG's name lifted, keeping it present, keeping it in
Absolutely.
the news. So I think that their relationship there, if she was going to leave the franchise where she spent her entire career, that's the place where you can leave and nobody can be upset about it, right? And if she'll have a chance for a title. The only reason why I don't give them a higher chance, though, is because there was a lot of organizational dysfunction there. We still don't know the status of Skylar Diggins-Smith, who left with about a month to go last season. There were some issues with head coach Vanessa Nygaard. There are a lot of contracts that still need to be signed. Technically, BG and Diana Taurasi are not under contract yet, although it's expected that they both return there. So there are still a lot of pieces up in the air. But yeah, Seattle also still has a bunch of pieces. So if they could go out and get a Courtney Vandersloot, as has been a rumor, although there's also a rumor that the Lynx are trying to talk to her and the Liberty are trying to talk to her. Everybody should be trying to talk to one of the best. I mean, her and Chelsea Gray are the 2 best point guards in the league. So if one of them hits the open market, I think every team should be ringing her phone. But it could be the kind of thing where we're seeing a super team form. So wherever they go, they're a package deal. But I think those are the 3 teams for me that I would keep an eye on.
And I kind of want to pinpoint right now on that thought about the super team kind of forming on the East Coast with the super team that we have on the West Coast here in Las Vegas with the Aces. And to your point, Howard Megdal, friend of the show, tweeted out that the Liberty have interest in Courtney coming to that team. And let me just say this before I ask you the question, because this is just my personal opinion. I think it would be amazing for the league if this does happen. The momentum, the rights deal coming up, You have two teams with two superstars. You have faces of the leagues going after each other. You know, the MJ Bird type philosophy, but also watching the Aces win the championship and watching them go up against the Storm in the semifinals, even the last game of the season, Sue Bird's last regular season game of this, that was some of the best basketball, men's or women's, I'd ever watched. Scores were in the 90s, the hundreds. It was fantastic. We get to the finals, and no disrespect to the Connecticut Sun and their fan base, but I'm sitting there covering these games and it's halftime and the score is 37-32. No one wants to watch that. And that's not what's going to happen if Brianna goes to New York. So I say all that to ask you this. Would it be good for the league if you have these two powerhouses on both sides of the country leading into the expansion 2024 rights deal and everything, and the momentum this league has and what they want to accomplish here in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. From my bias from my New York reporting, I think that the most exciting regular season game last year was that game between the Liberty and the Aces, where it was the highest ever scoring game in WNBA history. It was something like 115-107 or something like that in regulation. And it was just nonstop buckets back and forth. I think that was Sabrina's 30-point triple-double, which was the first time that had ever happened in WNBA history. And I think that it's also important to note, because sometimes this gets forgotten when we're looking at the scoring, that these are 40-minute games instead of 48. So they are doing it in a much more efficient. So when they're hitting the century mark, you know that it's just buckets nonstop. But yeah, I do like that idea of the East Coast, West Coast. I do like the idea of a rivalry. New York is one of the original franchises and has never won the title, although they've been there a couple of times, but not in a while. And the Aces are built as a dynasty right now. They have gotten their core under contract, which is really, really difficult to do in such a strict salary cap league. So they're going to be good for a while, and they are the standard right now. And right now you see teams tripping over themselves to try to be able to compete with what Vegas has going.
And we bring up the Aces, so let's stay right there, and we're gonna have to decipher some more tweets. Dearica Hamby's Twitter this past week. Let me just go through some of her tweets, retweets, and likes. First tweet: ain't no love in the heart of the city. Second tweet: imagine expressing your fears as a woman and being pregnant in this profession and world, then to be reassured that you were supported and your back was had, only to then be used against you. A retweet of never accept disrespect, go where you are appreciated. And lastly, a like saying, are the Aces pulling this shit? If they really are, that's quite disgusting. Obviously, a strict salary cap, like you just mentioned, and it is hard to keep a core together in any sport, let alone what's happening in the WNBA with the salary cap. What do you take from everything I just told you that's on their Twitter feed and everything going on with the Aces?
When the most recent CBA was signed, it was really, really important to the players' camp, to the Players Association, to revamp the league's policies when it came to parenting. And the last CBA specifically addresses maternity leave. And all teams are required to offer fully paid maternity leave to its players. Parents are eligible to receive childcare stipend, housing assistance. And then that's where it starts to get a little bit messy, because the salary cap will have your salary taken care of while you're out. But then if you are dealing with any kind of postpartum or struggling to get back on the court, or just taking the time that you absolutely deserve to take, then that starts to get a little bit murky about how teams can deal with that. They could designate you out for the entire season, but a lot of players don't want to miss a season of a shorter career already, because the W, just especially with the overseas play, it takes a toll on how long the peaks of careers can be. So that all being said, I understand Dearica's perspective of the priority should be my franchise looking out for me. I also want to take a step back and look at the state of the Aces, because I think that that's important too, and why this might affect them in a way that another team might not be affected. Because the Aces, if they keep their current 9 players under contract, they have less room to maneuver than any other team in the W this offseason.
And of
They
course, all the
have,
minutes
yeah,
played with the starters led the league, 30 minutes. I mean,
yep.
Asia was playing all those minutes in the playoffs, but continue. Sorry.
No, exactly. I was going to say that because last year Becky put a ton of mileage on those starters, and she got away with it because only Dearica had a prolonged injury that could have actually impacted their title chances.
Can I
But
add one thing
knowing,
too?
yeah,
With her injury, I do want to say this. I want to make this clear. The Aces don't win the title last year if Dearica doesn't come back versus Connecticut in the bigs. So that's the difficult situation because they needed her to win that championship.
hmm yeah, her versatility and her ability as a stretch four who can run the court and make all those cuts for Asia to get her some space, do all the dirty work, grab all those rebounds. They so that's the thing. So like they knew that they got away with it last year, right? But knowing going into this season that they will already probably miss Dearica for a while, that really cuts the margin for error. So you have to look at their roster. The starting five are all on guaranteed deals, but then Raquana Williams is a huge piece for them, someone who basically won them that fourth quarter for the title. And then it's younger players. It's Kirsten Bell, Ileana Rupert, Aisha Shepard, and they're all on team-friendly rookie scale deals. If you were to keep these 9 players that they currently have, and they have to get to the required 11, they would need one player on a rookie deal, which is 0 to 2 years, and then a near minimum veteran contract, sorry. And that's just really, even if you are a title team, it's a lot harder in this sport to ask people to take less money because already the ceiling is
Yeah.
so low. So if you're going to go to a veteran and say, can you take $75,000 when they can go somewhere else and make 160, even if they're chasing a ring, it's probably not going to happen. So that's what puts Vegas into this weird spot for, do we need to move a piece if we're trying to stretch our championship window, because they don't want to hurt their championship window by running this core into the ground for another year, another 2 years, even though they're still young, even though they're made up of a bunch of number 1 overall picks. That's definitely the danger. And I think that when you look at the roster, Dearica is, in their eyes, the player that they think, maybe because of the flexibility they have with Asia at the 4 or the 5, maybe they think that she's the one that they can replace or get value for without kind of breaking Becky's system.
And to your point, like the margins are so slim in this league that, all hands on deck, it's needed, especially if what's happening in New York is happening or if another team comes out of nowhere. Before we get you out of here, I sent a tweet out, wanted to see if anyone had some questions to ask you. So we got a couple right now, and we'll stay on the Aces. A fan asked, what moves do the Aces make, if any? Is the right move bringing back Kia and riding with the same squad?
So got to think that last offseason, the Aces kind of had some front office turmoil. They didn't have a named GM for most of the free
Yeah.
agency period. And it's really the team chemistry that saved them from some real messiness, because all of the players love each other. They love being there. That's huge credit also to Mark Davis, who has time and time again showed that he's really invested in the success of the W and in growing it. And just the culture that's been built there, because all of those players that we were talking about did come back on relatively team-friendly deals where they could all be max players across the league. But that almost happened because of the connections they already had. In the offseason, there was no team that was better positioned than the Aces to build a contender. And yes, it all came together. Kelsey Plum being healthy and taking a leap. Jackie Young really, really took a leap. Chelsea Gray played probably the best basketball I've ever seen in my life in that playoff run. And then Asia Wilson was the MVP, the defensive player of the year. Just a list of accolades just keeps going on for Asia. So like everything really came together, but it's because they kind of had to, right? So the bench did not bring them much. Raquana Williams in that last game, like I mentioned, was great, but she wasn't healthy for a majority of the season. The rookies, they cut a couple of the rookies that they made. So like their draft was largely just a loss for them last year. So I think they do need to make some moves. I don't necessarily think that Kia Stokes is the 5 on a on a repeat championship team. So Kia Stokes seems like she would likely be the odd one out there. But she is a great culture fit. I think the same thing can be said for Teresa Plaisance, for Sid Colson. But when you're looking at the production that you need on the court, I think that they do need to make some moves, but it's probably going to be moves along the periphery rather than a big splashy name.
Oh, what do you make of the Wings move so far? And do you think we will ever see a star player go to Dallas in free agency as opposed to always leaving Dallas? Poor fan asking this. I feel sorry for them.
Ooh, yeah. There have been campaigns for 3-4 seasons now to get Ty Harris and Alicia Gray out of Dallas, and we saw both of those happen in the last week or so. So yeah, it's tough. It's the franchise kind of keeps stumbling over itself, and what they did last year, the decision to give Enrique that supermax contract, is a player opting in. So I think some of it is just the recency bias where Enrique was hurt down the stretch and Dallas went on a bit of a run, and there was all that way too over the top talk about are they better without their best player, which I definitely push back against. But they have a franchise player, they have a player that they want to build around. So I think that they need to embrace that. They have a player that wants to be there, and they just need to figure out what the direction is. They love draft picks, and a lot of what I'm hearing is that's what's going back to them in the Alicia Gray trade. So they need to just focus on what they're trying to do, because right now, over the last half decade or more, Dallas has been happy to be in this purgatory where they're like, let's lift our best players, and then let's just try to fill it in with a bunch of lotto tickets and hope that something hits. But the way that I always looked at Dallas was they never draft for fit. They look at they have a draft board, they look at what that position is, and if they get 4 forwards in a row, they're like, well, that's the number one on our draft board. Let's just grab it. Let's just grab a walk. Let's just grab Charlie Collier. Let's just grab Satu Sabali. Let's just grab Bella Ollery. And then Izzy Harrison. Like, the next thing you know, you've got a whole bunch of players with redundancy that are all very, very skilled WNBA players that just can't get on the court at the same time. And I think that's what we saw last year was they had some injuries, and then all of a sudden Tierra McCowan looks like an all-star because she's getting consistent burn. So what Dallas needs to do, and I think bringing in Latricia Trammell is big for that, is they need to have a concrete plan as to what they want their roster to look like. And I think this free agency will be very telling. I would love to see Brittany Sykes follow LT from LA there, because LT's defensive just mindset, she really had the sparks, even though they were sometimes tough to watch because they couldn't score consistently.
Yeah.
They were hounding every possession down for the last few years, and that's huge credit to LT. So I don't know if the roster is defensive minded right now, but I think that that's what I would look forward to as a fan in free agency, is bringing in some of that defense. And is a player going to stay there? Love Enrique because she's there, she's happy, she's a superstar in this league. She led the league in scoring 2 years ago.
I'm glad you gave some positivity for that fan, and I hope they appreciate it. Last one, sounded a little wild that the fan wrote in, but hey, I'm down for it. If she doesn't retire, Candace Parker to Vegas, win a ring, and get out of here, huh? Who says no? You saying no, Myles? Who's saying no to this?
I think Candace is saying no. And it's just because she has done everything the right way in her career, right? Where she was loyal to her fan base. She was the rookie of the year, MVP the same year, right? And then like was winning titles from the jump. And when she left, the only place that she was going to go was back home to Chicago. And she went back home, and what'd she do? She won a ring, right? So like, narratively, I don't see her finishing her career as a mercenary, and I think that that's what would go on her resume.
You don't see it as the Jedi Master and Asia as the Padawan and the passing of the lightsaber and torch.
I mean, maybe if the Aces hadn't won last year, I think that's
Fair enough.
kind of the distinction. But while it's fun and it's just building super teams, she might look around and say, I don't know what's going on. Let's say Sloot leaves Chicago and she's like, I don't know if I want to stay here. And then no one goes to LA and she's like, I don't know if I want to go back there. And if she thinks she's only got 1 year left, then anything could be on the table. But she just doesn't seem like she's chasing super